We can make meaningful progress on dealing with gun violence. Because make no mistake, sit down, you'll hear what I have to say. If you think you... Let me finish my comment. Let him talk. No one, okay? Because make no mistake about it, this legislation is real progress, but more has to be done. The provision of this new legislation is going to save lives.
President Joe Biden was interrupted by a righteous protester while he was giving his remarks on the passage of bipartisan gun control legislation. Gun control legislation that's incredibly weak, to say the least. And the protester who stood up is Manuel Oliver, who happens to be the parent of one of the victims of the Parkland school massacre. Now, why was he protesting? He was protesting because he wanted to say what we've been saying on this show, what many activists and progressives have been saying in response to the bipartisan gun control legislation. It's too weak, it doesn't do enough, and it's really nothing to celebrate. In fact, Oliver made those comments in an interview with CNN prior to Biden's speech this morning. Let's take a quick look.
For me, it's not only not enough what we're passing, and you know very well what I've been preaching for, and even the president asked for more, and it's not happening. So I really wish there was more in this package of bills.
Are you worried that this bill, this passage means Congress isn't going to do anything for a long time?
Oh, I'm sure that's going to happen. Congress hasn't done much for a long time. So this is like giving a green light to Congress to wait another 30 years to do something else. But guess what? We're not going to let that happen.
Now, Manuel Oliver is justified in his rage and his criticism because the bipartisan legislation does not expand background checks or get rid of background check loopholes like the gun show loophole, for instance. It does not implement federal red flag laws. It only supports some of the states that have passed red flag laws with some federal funding in order to implement it. And it also got rid of the boyfriend loophole, meaning that boyfriends who, or a partner that you're not married to, if that person has engaged in domestic violence against a partner, they would be exempt from purchasing a gun the same way a husband or a married partner would be exempt from purchasing a gun as a result of their violence in a domestic dispute. But overall, it is incredibly weak, and that's why he's protesting it. And honestly, it's really nice to see that confrontation in real time as it happened this morning.
Yeah, so first, just a little bit more clarity on how terrible that bill is. And then I wanna talk about why that bill was counterproductive. So in terms of red flags issue, as we've pointed out in the past, it does not create red flag laws in states that don't have them. It supports ones that already have them. Nearly useless, okay. Background checks, it doesn't have them, and it doesn't prohibit you from getting a gun after 18. But between 18 and 21, they increase background checks. I mean, that change is microscopic. The boyfriend loophole, by the way, is way overhyped. So what it says is, if you don't live with your girlfriend and you're not married and you don't have kids together, then fine, this also applies to you. But what they don't tell you, and so that's a tiny, tiny group, okay? But good, they closed it, fine, I'm happy about that. But what they don't tell you is they also included, to appease the Republicans on that same issue, for all of them, for the spouses, for all of them, after 5 years, they say now you can have a gun. Because they say, well, after 5 years, domestic abusers are redeemed and they could all load up with weaponry again.
By the way,
so they made it worse. I just want to be clear, it made it worse.
With nothing in place to determine whether or not that individual has been rehabilitated in some way that would grant them the ability to purchase a gun, and for the state to know that that person would be safe with a gun.
Yeah,
there's nothing to determine that.
So the substance is very close to zero and might even be slightly negative. But there's two other things that are giant problems. One, it's a CYA operation for all the politicians. They cover their ass.
Exactly. Yep.
So they look good. Oh, we passed, and they keep saying it, and then the press, when they type it, like stenographers, drives me crazy. They're like, meaningful reform, real progress. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's nothing. That bill was not passed for you. That bill was passed for politicians.
That's right. That's why it was bipartisan. It was bipartisan in the Senate.
Yeah, if it's bipartisan, you know that it's useless. It's not, oh, bipartisan is so good. No, that means the Republicans took a hatchet to it and made sure that it didn't change a goddamn thing.
Okay, so now that you're on that Republican point, who did Biden thank during his speech? I want to go to that video. It's short because he decided to thank Republicans. Let's watch.
Oh, of course he did.
I also want to thank the bipartisan group of senators who worked so hard to get this done, especially Senators Murphy, Sinema, Cornyn, and Tillis. I hope it doesn't get you in trouble mentioning your name. Thank you. Good courage.
To courage, Cenk.
What courage to make the gun reform worse. Courage to get cover for Republicans so they don't have to talk about the issue. So they can say that they did gun control when they didn't do gun control. That bill was meant to help Republican politicians. And so now he lionizes them. By the way, this is the same span of time that the Biden White House put out a statement attacking pro-choice activists, saying they're not in the mainstream of the Democratic Party. So now it's not just progressives, it's like anyone who cares about any of the Democratic issues and is an activist, they say, oh, you're fighting for women's rights, we don't like you, okay? You're the bad guys. Oh, my Republican friends. And then he's like, I hope I didn't hurt you, Republicans, because I always mean to help you. Have I helped you enough, Republicans? Now to the most important point. It's the one Manuel Oliver made. And by the way, you can go to our channel on The Conversation where I interviewed him earlier. It's a really interesting interview about how heartbreaking his loss was, the loss of his son. But he made the best point. He said, now they're gonna think mission accomplished, and they're not gonna pass anything for years and years, maybe decades, because they're gonna say, oh, we passed that historic reform. And then of course, every ass in the mainstream media is gonna say, oh, historic reform. And they're all gonna ignore it for the rest of time and say Biden already did it. And every ass kisser of the Democratic Party is gonna come out and say, Cenk, how could you say that? Biden has already taken bold action and historic reform on gun control. Okay. No, he helped the Republicans and he couldn't help himself. In the press conference, he's like, oh, my beloved Republican friend. Goddamn loser.
Yeah, and look, it actually makes the future of gun control much harder to accomplish, because what are Republicans gonna do when this legislation inevitably fails to stop mass shootings from happening? They will point to the gun legislation, which reporters have reported as, substantive, as important gun legislation, gun reform. They're gonna point to it and be like, no, I mean, reporters say it's substantive and it didn't work. So it turns out gun control doesn't work. So we shouldn't even entertain this conversation. We shouldn't entertain this debate. I can predict the future on this issue. Republicans will do just that. And I mean, to think that we'll get anything in the next 30 years, I think is insanely generous to Congress. I don't even think we're gonna get anything close to the gun legislation that we need in the next 30 years, especially with the incredibly weak and ineffective Democratic Party that we're dealing with today.
I'm so sick of the lies of Democratic leadership and everyone in Washington. It's vomitous. I can't stand it anymore. So if you want to kiss their ass and say that it was historic and they did enough, you're an idiot and you're just helping Republicans. Anna's 100% right. After the next massacre, you're gonna say, oh, we already passed the bill.
And it didn't work.
1, mission accomplished. 2, and it didn't work. So we shouldn't pass any more bills. And then Biden will go out there and go and kiss their goddamn ass again. And then all of you will turn around to the so-called moderate Democrats and be, no, don't criticize him. Don't criticize him. He's doing such a great job of helping Republicans, Democrats. I'm sick of all of you, okay? Go and if you like Democrats who are Republicans, go, all right, vote for them, vote for them. I can't wait to beat all of you in the primaries so we can actually get a Democrat who's a Democrat and fights for us and gets something done. Until then, all of these Democratic leaders are not just useless, they're actively helping the Republican Party.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.